Outside is open and Dream Weekend wants to make a comeback in August. But will Andrew free it up? And would you even go if they get the go-ahead? I'm talking to Managing Director of Dream Entertainment, Scott Dunn, about their proposal to pull off the summer's biggest party series.
They estimated that Dream Weekend brings about $4.3 billion into the economy.
And later, the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. Real estate company First Rock Capital Holdings is looking to rebalance its portfolio.
And by rebalance, we mean they're reshifting the weight of the assets that they own.
STATIN's official growth numbers are out. We'll tell you which industries and companies you should be looking at.
We're seeing in terms of the goods producing sector, which includes agriculture, manufacturing, construction and mining, that those areas are actually seeing more growth than for the services.
And overseas, Coca-Cola is back to pre-pandemic earnings.
Coca-Cola has a strong portfolio, so it's more than just a soda company. They sell water, they sell many other beverages such as tea, people like iced tea. So
I'm Kalila Reynolds and welcome to Taking Stock. We're bringing you all the latest business news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. But before we get started, make sure you head over to my website, KalilaReynolds.com/newsletter to get my newsletter straight to your inbox twice a week. You can click the link up here or in the description box below. Now come on, let's get this money. But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart.
There's an increased demand for Jamaican ganja on the global market. That's according to the Cannabis Licensing Authority CLA, which says it has been issuing export permits to territories as far as Australia and Germany in recent months. CLA says local cannabis is being sought for research and medical purposes. It says 42 export authorizations have been issued to 10 entities trading around the globe. Since the start of the year, the authority says it has issued 19 export permits and has seen an increase in export permit requests by licensees. CLA said the increased activity indicates that Jamaica has been producing cannabis to the standards required of these other jurisdictions. Acting CEO of the CLA, Faith Graham, says there is potential for commercial quantities to be exported in the future once markets are opened. The authority had created an interim export-import policy allowing licensees to export cannabis and its extracts since 2018. Jamaica's export regulations are at the final stages of being enacted. Dream Entertainment, organizer of Dream Weekend, has submitted an application and plan to the Entertainment Ministry to host its flagship event this summer. Dream says it's committed to working with all the government ministries and agencies to use Dream Weekend 2021 as a pilot event for a safe reopening of the entertainment sector. Last year's staging of Dream Weekend was cancelled due to the pandemic. This year's event is proposed for Negril from August 5 to 9. Dream says it has conceptualized a bubble approach to ensure safety and compliance. All patrons and staff will need to be either fully vaccinated or present a negative COVID-19 test before being allowed to get an event armband. Additionally, all hotels and venues for patrons and staff will be on the resilient corridor. First Rock Capital Holdings is targeting an asset base of $50 million by the end of the 2021 financial year. This as it furthers its expansion plans across the United States and the Caribbean. Co-founder and CEO Ryan Reed made the disclosure at the company's first annual general meeting held in Castries, St. Lucia last week. It's a target the company initially expected to hit within 5 years of becoming a public company. It listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange in February 2020. However, Reed says they are looking to accelerate that plan. Reed says First Rock will continue its asset diversification strategy in order to meet the goal. The company had realigned its focus solely on real estate investments as it executes on new developments across the region. The company had closed out the 2020 financial year with a balance sheet of $35.82 million. Find out what the analysts think about First Rock's new plans later in the show. The Jamaica Renewable Energy Association, JREA, is calling on the government to classify lithium-ion batteries as renewable energy solutions. Lithium-ion batteries are rechargeable batteries commonly used for portable electronics and electric vehicles. Importers of lithium batteries currently pay an extra 20% in GCT because the JREA says they are not classified correctly. It's calling for the batteries to get the same GCT rating as photovoltaic batteries, another type of rechargeable battery used in solar energy systems. Meanwhile, the association says stakeholders have also been challenged with an extra 20% duty from the Council for Trade and Economic Development quoted CARICOM external tariff. It says the government did not file the application to suspend the tariff in time. It's recommended that the process for suspension be started up to 1 year before the expiry date so that there is never a lapse in coverage. JREA says the added costs may slowly bring the commercial and residential segment of the renewable energy market to a halt. The Statistical Institute of Jamaica STATIN says the economy fell almost 7% between January and March this year when compared to the same period in 2020. This is 1 percentage point higher than the preliminary estimates released by the Planning Institute of Jamaica last month. STATIN says the outturn stems from the continued impact of the pandemic. During the period, all the services industries declined, except producers of government services, which remained relatively unchanged. Hotels and restaurants took the biggest hit, falling almost 56%. The goods-producing industries, on the other hand, recorded higher outputs with growth in construction and mining and quarrying. The Bank of Jamaica BOJ continues to hold the policy interest rate at 0.5% per year. The rate is offered to deposit-taking institutions on overnight placements with BOJ. The central bank says the decision to hold the rate was based on the assessment that inflation will remain within the target range over the next 2 years, despite recent increases in international commodity prices. The next policy decision announcement date is August 19.
What's Hot was brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart. When we come back, would you attend Dream Weekend this summer if it gets approved? Hey moneymakers, you're not an official part of the family until you have your merch. Visit KalilaReynolds.com/store to order your t-shirt and your mask today. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock is brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency. Insurance made easy. Welcome back to Taking Stock. Well, all you deprived party junkies, Independence Weekend no good again. Well, maybe. Dream Weekend may be coming up. They've applied to the government to host the popular Summer Party series. Joining me now to discuss, we have Managing Director of Dream Entertainment, Scott Dunn. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm great. Just coming off a great weekend.
All right, so we have a lot to talk about, including this past weekend in Florida, where you are right now. But first, let's get into some background about the whole entertainment industry over the past year. I'm sure it's been a very tumultuous year for you. Tell me what it's been like standing in your shoes there at Dream Entertainment.
I don't know if I've been standing. I've been more like been on my face for the last 15 months. So yeah, it's been tough. And I would say even more tough for someone, for a company like Dream being one of the formal players. So most people operating in events in Jamaica operate relatively informally. They don't have, the type of overheads we have in terms of with staff and offices and storerooms and this type of stuff. So it's been a really tough 15 months, but it looks like things are starting to look up a little bit.
Yeah, we're talking Carnival canceled. You have a big stake in that with Exodus. Dream Weekend canceled. Talking and so many other events that you host. Yeah. What type of losses have you been looking at?
The losses have been quite significant. I would say as much to say within tens of millions, but it's definitely in the tens of millions. I'll say that much. Because I said we've been through actual 3 postponements of Carnival, starting in April 2020, October 2020, and April 2021. 3 dates that we've put out, we've had to postpone. We postponed Dream Weekend last summer, Dream Weekend New York last summer. So we're hopeful now that we will be able to stage Dream Weekend in Jamaica this summer. We are staging Dream Weekend New York at the end of August, and hopeful that maybe we can have Carnival by about October.
So give me an update on where you are with those applications.
Right, so we submitted an application on Saturday. So we had actually started discussing it with the government immediately after the Prime Minister's announcement on Tuesday. We literally got on a call Tuesday night with the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports. submitted our final application on Saturday to MCGES. They have now passed it on to ADPEM. I believe they're okay with what they've seen. It's now at ADPEM. So we're hoping that within the next week we can get an answer so that we can move ahead and have Dream Weekend August 5th to 9th.
That's very optimistic. That's in just about a month's time. How long does something like Dream Weekend take to plan? It's a massive undertaking, isn't it?
It usually takes a year, so we basically start planning right as one finishes. But obviously, we would have some stuff in place already, and we've, which is why, our overheads have been high, because we've had to keep our staff in place. So whenever an announcement like this came, we got on the phones, so we're kind of just putting everything in line. Being optimistic that we're going to get a yes from the government.
Boy, you're giving yourself a whole heap of work there. I don't envy you if you are indeed to try to pull this off in a month and you do get that yes.
Right. So we've been asking for the government for opportunity to work. So I'm not going to complain about hard work right now. We also understand that it's way beyond our own company, Dream Entertainment, but there's such a large ecosystem of people that rely on Dream Weekend. Last year, the government did a study and they estimated that Dream Weekend brings about $4.3 billion into the economy. So that's a lot of people, are going to be happy if Dream Weekend can happen. I think the government, is conscious of that and needs to let it happen, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Kamal a couple of years ago, and he had told me at the time that your audience for Dream Weekend actually is primarily from overseas. It's I think he said something like 80% that comes in for Dream Weekend.
Yeah, a little less than that. I think the last Tourist Board study is about 67% international patrons. So again, that bodes well for us, because obviously all those people are going to come in with a COVID negative test, within days of the event. Some of them coming in on the day of the event, as well as they're coming from cities that predominantly, are like, 50% vaccination. So, New York is our biggest market, followed by London, England, followed by South Florida, Toronto. These are all places that have large percentages of the population now vaccinated. So, that kind of is part of our plan that we're putting in place to really create somewhat of a COVID bubble for Dream Weekend.
What role would vaccinations play in being able to attend this event? Because it says 67% coming from abroad, but that still leaves 33% local, and vaccination isn't as prominent here.
Right. So basically, what we've proposed to the government, and which I say is now before ADPEM, is a event that is, totally either vaccinated persons or a COVID negative test. So again, for the local population, because we don't have high numbers of vaccination, that's going to be predominantly through a COVID negative test. So at
what point do you present the test?
You present the test at our redemption center in the Grill. So for years we've operated a redemption center, so we're used to processing, something in the range of like 10,000 people over 3 days through our redemption center. So we're used to processing large numbers of people. It's at a huge location, the Long Bay football field in the Grill. So what we do is we'd have an isolated area within the football field where people would come now and you'd be verified essentially. So you're going to either bring in a COVID test done, let's say within 48 hours of the event, or you're going to bring proof of vaccination. For the people that coming from abroad, they simply can show the app that they would have applied to come back into Jamaica. So, again, and then for people who can't prove, we'll arrange for them to do a COVID test nearby. So there'll be a number of locations in the Grill, which there already are. A lot of the hotels are already operating this. And most of our people, whether locals or international, stay within hotels on Norman Manley Boulevard in the Grill. So people will do a COVID test and return to the venue Once you can prove that, you get a armband to prove that you're, either vaccinated or COVID negative, and then you'd move to the next step to purchase tickets or collect your season band.
Because I was wondering about that, because you do run the risk of people coming and trying to show any piece of paper to say that they have received their COVID negative test or been vaccinated. So how do you control to ensure that
the Ministry of Health would be on point for that. I mean, they're the professionals. They're the ones that I guess would have to verify that.
So you will have officials from the Ministry of Health there doing that verification?
Yeah, for sure. That would be there. Well, certainly that's what we have proposed, is to have Ministry of Health on hand to do that. We wouldn't want that to be our responsibility as a promoters. We'd want that done by the health professionals.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So once you have established this and you got your armband and you're in the event, are there any COVID protocols inside? Because now we're assuming everybody's COVID negative. Do we still have to social distance? Do we still have to wear masks?
Well, what we're going to do is reduce venue capacity. So again, that's something for the government to confirm up to what capacity of a venue we can go. But naturally, if you only using, let's say for argument's sake, 50% of venue capacity, that in itself allows for some amount of social distancing. We've proposed to have masks basically unless you're actively eating or drinking. So similar to if you're in a restaurant or a hotel, we'd expect it to remain with your mask unless you're actually in the process of having a drink or eating something.
Nobody's gonna abide by that. Once you start eating and drinking, the mask stay off. Nobody's gonna keep the mask on in a party.
Say the same thing about hotels and restaurants, but again, I feel like events are the ones that everybody thinks, seems to think that that's the only space that people won't be able to observe protocols. So, one of the things I've been saying is that the people that come to events are the same people that do everything else in society, the same people that go to the supermarket or the bank or the tax office. So, or go to restaurants and hotels. So, if people can abide by the protocols in those spaces, I think they can abide by the protocols within our events, particularly if you run your events in a professional manner. So, things that people get away with at other events, even normally they won't get away at our events, So
I think it's a different setting, so it's hard to compare going to a party with going to the tax office, because one, you have a lot of alcohol involved, so people aren't at their full I don't want to say at their full senses, but they're disinhibited. Let's use that word.
All-inclusive hotel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it's not much different than an all-inclusive hotel, though, is it? I mean, and I could argue that an all-inclusive hotel, you're drinking from morning till night versus you're going to a party and maybe drinking for 3 hours. Typically, if an event is 10 till 4, people typically come out from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. So people generally at a party drinking for 3 hours, while when they're at an all-inclusive hotel, them drinking all day long. So again, but the tourism industry and the resilient corridor have proved that people have been able to abide by protocols. We haven't seen spikes resulting out of the hotels, and we think similarly we can do that in the event space if we do things properly. I mean, we're going to also have COVID monitors in place at the event, so we'll have COVID monitors at the gate and throughout the event. We'll have isolation areas. So if anybody
what's a COVID monitor? What does that person do? Is it a person what is it?
The role at the gate primarily would be to make sure that nobody even enters the line at the gate without one of the armbands that prove that already show that you're COVID negative or vaccinated. And we pull those people and tell them they need to go and get tested and get to the redemption center to verify it, or they can enter the event. Within the event, it's to make sure that the protocols are in place so that we have the right amount of sanitization stations, wash stations, that people not crowding at bars, people not crowding in the bathrooms, and also to monitor people's health, in terms of just looking around if anybody looks that looks unwell, for argument's sake, where we feel that we maybe need to test somebody. And one of the things we have in place both at the redemption center and events is that if somebody appears to be symptomatic in any way, somebody comes up with a high temperature check, these things, we actually are going to require a PCR test for that rather than an antigen test. which obviously the turnaround on that is a little longer, so that person wouldn't be able to return to an event or to the redemption center for maybe 24 hours, which is when we typically would get the PCR results. So most of the patrons would be just doing antigen tests. But again, if you appear to be symptomatic or we have any reason for suspicion, we know of somebody that's been with somebody who was positive, then we require a PCR to return to the event.
How many patrons do you typically get at Dream Weekend?
So Dream, typically we average about 7,000 people per event over 9 events. So we have a total attendance of 63,000, but we have people that repeat events. So in terms of unique patrons, I would say about 30,000 typically.
But for this event, one, people aren't traveling the same way that they used to for obvious reasons, and you will likely have reduced capacity. So how many are you expecting if you're to get the go-ahead?
Well, what we're attempting to do is use our larger venues, so venues with capacities of 10,000 plus. Again, we're hoping to get somewhere between 30 and 50% of capacity of those venues. Now, how many people actually show up, that we won't know, but what we do know is, that we can put, some of our venues, we can put anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people in with lots of space.
And you're looking to do the full suite of parties that you normally do, all 9?
So we did 9 last time in 2019. We've applied for 7. So again, the curfew restrictions is partially the reason for that. So because we have a 11 o'clock curfew in place, I believe, the events would have to end maybe about 10 p.m. So that would reduce our ability to obviously have night events. So most of our events would be like day into the early part of the night, and then we probably would do 2 breakfast parties. So probably 5 day into night events and 2 breakfast parties, 7 events in total.
Mm-hmm. But you won't have people, your COVID monitors, monitoring people whining, especially if you're white on each other.
No, so I mean, that's not what we're attempting to do. Again, we're already putting together a very controlled environment. So one of the arguments that I make, and it's even in the proposal, that there's no environment in Jamaica right now that's as safe as that. I mean, everywhere you go, you have no idea of what somebody's, people aren't gathering already, people aren't closely. So again, if somebody is going to be whining on somebody in a party that's the same person, then maybe we'll be whining on at a small event with 100 people, which the government is allowing, or it might be the same person that they drive there in a car with together, or the same person that they're sharing a bed with. So if people come together and people are friends, people are going to gather together, and they're doing that, across society in many different ways. If you and I go to the supermarket together, we don't walk 6 feet apart in the supermarket.
But at the same time, people go to parties to meet other people. So you might not necessarily go there with if you have a significant other, you might go there looking to meet a new significant other. So there's that. So you had an event, 4th of July weekend in Florida, which is why you're in Florida. And I should let our viewers and listeners know that we're actually recording this interview before the event. So I can't really ask you how it went since it hasn't happened yet, but by the time it airs, it would have happened. But tell me what you're expecting for the weekend.
We're very, very optimistic about having a great weekend. I mean, we have some concerns about the weather, but we can't control the weather, so I won't dwell on that too much. But ticket sales have been quite robust. People are very excited about the event. It's a partnership between Dream Entertainment and Sands. So it's really 2 large event brands coming together to host this event, Epic Weekend. It's would have been July 2nd to the 5th. So it's a Friday to a Monday event. We're doing 8 events over the course of the weekend. So a very similar format to Dream Weekend, but with the added flavor of the Sands team. So it's looking good. I mean, Florida is wide open. They're having events here thousands and thousands of people. And honestly, Florida hasn't seen any spikes resulting from opening of the events industry. So our hope is that Jamaica will mirror that.
When did the events industry open in Florida?
I think they basically reopened from about September, from my recollection. So this is actually our third event in Florida. So we did an Exodus event in Miami in January. We had Dream Week in February, and now we're doing Epic in July.
I did see that there was a spike in Florida around the holiday season, so December time. Since then, it's tapered off. And now in Florida, there's this concern about this new COVID variant,
The new variant,
Delta, the Delta variant.
the variant.
So is that
Yeah.
causing you any concern?
I mean, just I don't know, as a promoter, if it causes me any more concern. As a human being, it who's been through this pandemic, it certainly does. I think everybody is a bit concerned about it, but I'm fully vaccinated. I guess it's yet to see if the vaccination will hold up to the Delta, but I feel comfortable being fully vaccinated.
And you also have an event in New York. Tell us about Dream Weekend New York.
Right, so that's August 27th to 29th. It's our first stage in a Dream Weekend New York. It should have been last summer, but obviously New York was locked down last summer. So we're actually relaunching that event today, which is obviously the week before this airs. And very excited about that because New York is our largest market for Dream Weekend in Jamaica. So we probably have more people from New York than we have from Kingston at Dream Weekend in Jamaica. So it's a huge market for us. It's a huge diaspora market. So we're getting together and really excited about pulling that off in 2 months.
Yeah, and it's not just the diaspora market, but you have a solid reputation among the African American market in general through the connections with the Caribbean that they have there in New York, a very diverse population.
Correct.
Boy, Scott, you're giving yourselves, you guys are going on overdrive right now, trying to make up for the past 15 months, aren't you?
Yeah. We have to get off the ground, man. As I tell you, it's been 15 months on our face, and we're not trying to stay there. So, it's time to get up, dust yourself off, and hit the ground running. I personally, I've spent a lot of time lobbying the government. I've been very public about it. I'm not going to be the one to be like that. Anybody's going to say, "Oh, you asked for this, and no, you're not doing anything." I'm ready to work. I'm ready to work, and Dream is ready to go.
We can see that. Well, I wish you all the best, Scott.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
All right, later. So after hearing Scott's points, what do you think? Take our poll. Should Dream Entertainment be allowed to stage this year's event in August? Comment below and also take the poll on the community page of my channel. The link is in the description below. Up next, we've got your market recap and the analysts are standing by. This segment of Taking Stock was brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency. Insurance made easy.
Time now for your market recap, brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments. The Jamaica Stock Exchange declined, with the combined index losing 1%. 105 stocks traded across both the main and junior markets of the JSE for the week ending Friday, July 2, 2021. 47 advanced, 51 declined, and 7 stayed the same. Nearly 97 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, selling $681 million. Fesco traded the most, taking up nearly 16% of the market. The stock was third among this week's biggest gains to open this new week at $1.42. Wigton Wind Farm ordinary shares traded the second highest, with people buying and selling 15 million shares in the company. The stock gained 2 cents to open the week at 58 cents. And Derriman Trading Company rounded out the most traded, taking up 11% of market volume. The stock lost 6 cents to open the week at $2.50. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. G West Corporation ordinary shares stock price rose nearly 49% to close last week at $1.19. JMMB Group 7.25 VRJMD preference shares stock price rose 36% to be the second for this week's biggest gains. The stock opens this week at $1.50. On the losing side now, MPC Caribbean Clean Energy was the biggest loser for the week, down 21%. The stock closed last week at $117. First Rock Capital Holdings USD was second on the list. Its stock price down 17% this week. The stock opens this new week at 7 cents. Rounding off the biggest losers, Jetcon Corporation lost 11%. The stock also came second for the month of June's biggest gains. The stock opens this new month, July, at $1.29. Now here's a quick look at some of the highlights for the month of June. The main index advanced by 0.8%. The junior market advanced by about 1.5%. The financial index advanced by 1.5%. After resumption of Carib movie theater in Crossroads, the stock's price saw an increase to open this new month, July, at $1,463.79. Rounding of the biggest gains for the month of June, Portland JSX stock advanced nearly 32% to open this new month at $9.41. T-Tech just keeps falling. Its stock down nearly 24% to open this new month at $4.75. JMMB Group 7% VRJMD preference shares lost nearly 22%, down to $1.60. And the Siboney Group rounded out the biggest losers, down 21% to 33 cents. Market Recap was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Proven Wealth and Ideal Portfolio Services. Welcome back to Taking Stock. I've got a team of analysts to examine the week in business. I'm joined this week by Senior Wealth Advisor at Ideal Portfolio Services, Oric Angus. We also have with us Assistant Manager of Private Equity at Proven Management, Julian Morrison. And we welcome back Research and Strategy Analyst at Sagicor Investments, Jodianne Harris. Welcome back, everybody. Hi, Julian, Jodianne, Oric.
Hi, Kalila. Thanks for having us.
All right, let's go. So let's start with First Rock. So, and viewers, you should note that there's a slight delay with Jodianne's audio, so don't let that throw you off. Well, let's start with First Rock Capital Holdings, a real estate company listed since January 2020. They're now looking to rebalance their portfolio. And when I say rebalance, they mean based on geography. So, Oric, tell me what First Rock is attempting to do and why.
Yes. So they're attempting to rebalance their real estate portfolio by geographical location, and by rebalance we mean they're reshifting the weight of the assets that they own. Remember, in the prospectus that outlined what the portfolio will be comprised of. So it was more income producing, developments producing, and capital gains. So I guess the company is now in a better position where they're able to capitalize on some of those gains and make use of some of those income, and not overly expose themselves to any undesirable risk. What they're trying to do is to manage the risk. So currently, based on a report that I've read, the company is exposed by total asset. 68% of the total asset is held here in Jamaica, 10% is in Cayman, 16% for Costa Rica, and 6% for Florida. So based on those percentage weighting, they're going to realign that and seek other investment opportunities outside of the wider Caribbean, mainly in the United States. I think it's a very good strategy. For any active managed portfolio, there's always a need for realignment or rebalancing. So I do think it's a good approach for the company. And as we know, they have a lot of deals in the pipeline, and they'll need capital to fund some of those deals. So why not? I mean, I support that move in full.
Julian, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. At 67% of their portfolio in Jamaica, do you think they're too exposed to the Jamaican market?
Well, it's a fair starting point, given that the fund is very young. They have a strategy that is typically longer term than many other asset management platforms. So, for example, if it was a portfolio of stocks, for example, that was being managed, it means that the level of rebalancing would be more frequent. But given that it's a real estate portfolio, the discipline around that is under a different type of time horizon. So the fund is young, they have a longer time horizon, and they have many other things that they can execute. So starting with 68% in Jamaica is not really alarming because there's so much further to go within the context of the life of the fund. So that's not alarming. I agree with Oric in that it's good to have that diversification and that gradual pivot. And it's good to start where you know, because that's where you have the relationships, and that is how you can have what is called the home field advantage. You understand the risk factors, you have the relationships in that market. So that's a good way of balancing the risk, especially in the beginning of the life of the fund.
Jodian, what are your thoughts on First Rock and their attempt to rebalance, especially in getting more properties in the United States market? Why there, you think?
Well, I think part of their moving to, I think they have some already exposure there. So, I mean, I think when they started out, they would have already had some amount of properties in the US. And it is something that they could be more familiar with, as part of your initial build out. It works well to continue to, diversifying in spaces that you're familiar with, that you're also doing your research and looking at other areas. I mean, diversification on a whole is generally widely accepted. I mean, I'll agree with Julian that it is a new company. They're still fairly new, so you wouldn't expect to naturally at this stage seeing a wide vision, but they have offered some amount of it, and so I mean, this now moving towards a little bit more spreading out in terms of how it is that they are geographically exposed is good.
Well, speaking of the United States, let's look at some stocks on those markets. I know Julian and Oric, you both track US markets quite closely because they're at Proven Wealth and Ideal. You are able to, or through those companies, you are able to purchase stocks and assets on the US market. So let's look at the performance of Nike. Oric, their earnings and sales have beaten estimates.
Yeah, I mean it has been really impressive. One of those Nike is one of those company you always wonder if they'll be able to top their previous performances, and they keep delivering. Based on the last Q4 report, total revenue increased by 6.3 billion. Sorry, to 12.3 billion from 6.3 a year earlier. The sales were aided by Nike not being able to um to offsell some of their goods at discount price. They're now back to selling their goods at full price, so that has boosted the revenues. Most of the revenue in North America as is coming from that jurisdiction. The company is now back into wholesale sales, so more wholesale sales are coming. So that is coming on from the events that are being held now. So, for example, you have the Euro Championships going on. You have Copa America. Of the Euro Championships, I think Nike has about 9 of the countries of the total of 24 within that space. In South America, Brazil being the largest by size and population, they are the sponsor for that country. So you find that sales are beginning to normalize for Nike. Another key factor for them is the Olympics is coming up. So all of these are good revenue outlooks for the company and things that the company have been benefiting from for the last couple of for the last quarter. Now, when you get down to the bottom line, where
And
net
all of that
profit is
comes with
concerned,
merchandising, Oric. So,
right?
so when these events resume, it's not just wholesaling to equip the
Exactly.
teams, but all the merchandise for all the fans.
Right. I mean, the company is still facing some supply chain challenges based on the containers being delayed and the logistics cost and all of that. But all in all, the bottom line was still fairly healthy. Net profit came in at around $1.5 billion or 93 cents per share. So that was really impressive looking at Nike results. I think the company is in a fairly decent position now, and the shareholders are very happy with where they are now in terms of the stock price.
Yeah, so we spoke about that issue with the containers last week on
Yeah.
taking stock, the logistics difficulties that a lot of locals are having, and it's not just limited to Jamaica. Anybody trying to get stuff out of China right now, logistically. So while the show was airing, actually, our guest had said that last year or pre-pandemic containers cost about 3,000 US, and then now they were getting quotes of about 14,500 US for the same container. And while the show was premiering, another manufacturer reached out to me and said he just got a quotation for 25,000 US dollars for a container, as the bids are that high. It's that, listen, everybody's trying to fight to get their stuff shipped. And so you have to bid high, which means that some people just won't get their stuff. If you can't
Right,
compete with
right.
Nike, for example, poor
Yeah.
you.
But Nike
So,
has been solid over the last few years. It's still a growing company. You can get both value and growth from it. I do think the outlook remains positive. Again, from all of these sporting events, you have the World Cup coming up next year as well. Nike has been a top performing brand within the sporting industry, and I think it will continue to be a dominant force for some time to come.
Yeah, that's a household name. Everybody knows Nike. Another household name that we're looking at this week is Coca-Cola, Julian. Their earnings are back to pre-pandemic levels. Tell me about Coca-Cola's performance.
So Coca-Cola for their 3 months period, 2021, which is ended March, they had a hit in terms of their earnings. It's down 19% to 2.25 billion. However, their revenue is up roughly 5% to 9.02 billion. What's interesting is that the operating expenses are flat at 2.67 billion. So what actually created that squeeze in terms of earnings is the fact that interest expenses jumped 2.3 times to 442 million. And this is due to a portion of their debt stock maturing in this period. So they have a block of bonds outstanding on the market, and a portion of the bonds is now are now due. So they'd have to pay down that debt, which is why you'd see that big jump. So in terms of their cash flows from operations, they're up essentially 3 times to 1.64 billion, which is excellent for a year-over-year movement. It means that the business is managing its inventory extremely well, and that cash is actually coming into the business. That's very important in times like these, especially with supply chain challenges and other things happening, and positioning the business to take advantage of future periods in terms of accelerating growth and so on. Um, in terms of the stock itself, the PE is around 32 times. It's at $54.10. It's actually down 4% from its 52-week high. It's down 1.5% from the 50-day moving average, but it's up 3% from the 200-day moving average. So what that means is that the stock is not necessarily overbought, even though it's gradually creeping up. And within the context of the next quarter, when there is even more business reopening, there are more people outside, there are more people playing sports, there are more people eating out at restaurants, it should propel their growth in terms of earnings even further, and that should feed over into a higher price. So that is something to pay attention to. Coca-Cola has a strong portfolio, so it's more than just a soda company. They sell water, they sell many other beverages such as tea, people like iced tea. So they have a diversified package of goods that they offer to the market in different areas geographically. So I think that Coca-Cola is well positioned to take advantage of what is possible for the next quarter in terms of sales and profitability.
So let's look finally on the local front at the economy. Statin's latest numbers are out, basically confirming what PIOJ had projected a couple months ago, Jodianne. So what are we looking at on the economy?
Right. So looking at official numbers, we are seeing where the economy actually declined by about 6.7% for the first quarter of 2021. I mean, it's still a steep decline, but however, when it is that you compare to the declines that we had in 2020 or since the impacts of COVID, as you know, on the economy, it's actually a reduction in the year-over-year rate of decline. And so that's good news. And if it is that you were to compare it with the fourth quarter last year, we're actually seeing an improvement. So there would have been a bit more production January to March of 2021 versus December 2020. And so that brings with it some good news. We're seeing in terms of the goods producing sector, which includes agriculture, manufacturing, construction, and mining, that those areas are actually seeing more growth than for the services. So in the impact sector, it's still strong. We're seeing recovery for areas like mining and construction have really been, big stars thus far for this quarter in terms of their production and performance. I think when it is that you look overall, though, there's improvement right across the industries. And so, in terms of that slowing growth rate that we speak of, comparing when we look at the quarterly rates for 2020, it is reflected right across the industries in the economy. So, we're seeing where things are beginning to look a little bit better, things are beginning to look a little bit up. Just as Julian had mentioned about beverages, one of the things that we note for January to March is that beverage production actually was also up, even though the
nice.
overall manufacturing industry recorded a decline. Yes, I guess you can locally think of your companies, that are in that space, and think good news probably to come in our next earnings season. But it's showing gradual improvement. I mean, it's not quite growth where we want it to be, but we're getting there. And I think as we have been seeing with reopening, areas like entertainment, which has been impacting areas such as other services industry, should expect to see a little bit more improvement as we go along into the year, in the quarters to come.
So companies to look at could be like your Wysinco, your Last M, companies that are Deramon involved in beverage manufacturing, since you said that those numbers are up. You also mentioned the stars of the quarter, mining and quarrying up 7% and construction up 10%. What's up with mining? What's driving that increase?
Well, for mining, it's really higher production at the Jamaica plant. And one of the things is just that they're better able using the capacity that they have. So what they refer to is improvement in capacity utilization rate. So it's really a greater efficiency that the plant is operating, which has allowed for greater production, as well as they're seeing an increase in exports for crude bauxite, I think it is. So, in terms of demand from outside, I think that's growing. So you think of areas where production would have stopped in 2020, think of things that have, in terms of car manufacturing. I think if you look at it globally, persons are returning to having more manufacturing in those spaces. So the demand for alumina or crude products in terms of bauxite is growing.
And then for that boom in the construction sector, which is up 10%, you might want to look at, well, Julian, tell me which companies you might want to look at in the construction sector.
A clear advantage would accrue to Carib Cement. There are also other businesses that have linkages to construction, such as Lumber Depot, of course, because even though it might not seem obvious to some persons, they're actually linked to hardware, and a lot of the inputs, such as steel, lumber, and those products, they would feed over into the construction sector. And also there's Jamties that also does some real estate and building, so they could also benefit from that somewhat.
Even Fosrich, they're on the junior market, right? We don't talk about Fosrich much.
Yeah, and of
lighting
course,
and electrical.
Yeah, definitely. And we know that low interest rates are feeding into the momentum in terms of construction, because the fact is, building is heavily driven by debt. And when interest costs are low, it creates a tailwind for building. So that's a main thing. Bankers are actually looking to turn over these loans. They're trying to get out the loans as much as possible. Mortgages are very important to banks. So when interest rates are low, they have to go on an aggressive mortgage rollout, I should say, and that will propel construction.
Auric, anything you want to add here on this conversation about the economy? What does your mind race to when you hear this type of news?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think we have fairly expected that the growth will not be significant when things start to open up back or recover. It's like we're pretty much building over or starting over from scratch. I agree with Julian in regards to the interest rates being low and banks and mortgages and institutions taking advantages of that. In terms of companies that are listed on the exchange, we all named them already. Julian went on to do that. You can look at REITs as well. Those stocks those companies are into construction, so they've proven they have a REIT themselves. First Rock, which we discussed earlier today. Fosrich not only into electrical, they're also going into plumbing supplies as well. So all these are little factors that we can add together in making our investment decisions. But in terms of the STATIN report, that was good. It was fairly within my expectations, and I'm looking for gradual improvements as time comes.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your input as usual.
Yeah.
One last thing, Kalila. Just for persons to bear in mind, in Jamaica, our service sector is actually bigger than the goods producing sector, which is why we'd identify a contraction in the service sector, dragging the overall GDP result, even though the goods producing sector is doing better. So it means that for our overall growth picture to improve, it's heavily reliant on the success or the trajectory of the services sector, such as tourism, restaurants, typically things that are linked to being outside. So that's a key consideration.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great point, Julian. Thanks again.
All right, bye,
Thank you,
Kalila.
Kalila. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. So, based on that analysis, which companies are you looking to buy or sell this quarter? Comment below. Stay tuned for what's coming up from KRM this week. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Proven Wealth and Ideal Portfolio Services. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share with a friend. Also subscribe to our newsletter at KalilaReynolds.com and turn on those post notifications so that you can be the first to see all of my other features. We want to help people learn more about money so we can all get this money together, right? This week on Money Mondays JA, investing or saving? Which one is better? We'll compare them. On Money Moves JA, market research is often the forgotten child in business, but we'll tell you why it should get some of your budget. And of course, stay tuned for the latest in our special series with Pulse Investments. Well, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kalila Ray, and follow at Taking Stock JA on Instagram. If you want to connect with the analysts this week, check the description box below for their contact information. Also, visit our website, KalilaReynolds.com, for financial information you can use however you like it. Watch, listen, or read. Now tell a friend about Taking Stock, because investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm Kalila Reynolds. Let's get this money.
Let's get this money.